Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm just doing another video here because there was a little bit of discrepancy with my video the other day. Somehow the variable frame rates that occur in FLVs gave me some weird frames per second of the videos, although the end result is within about 0.03 seconds, so a very negligible margin of error. But we'll start off first with Joden's video here, and we're going to be counting this from the first frame that the white box disappears on the start file button. It seems to be a pretty consistent point to identify in both runs. So we're opening up the FLV in Vdub now using this plugin. And we are going to jump right to the 24-minute, 16-second There we go. And so there's the first frame right there. 24 minutes, 16 seconds, and 100 milliseconds. Also, we got the frame count there as well, 43,683. Just jump to the file information for 2 seconds. This one is at 30 frames per second. I don't know why the variable frame rate was showing up differently in after it had been wrapped in an AVI wrapper. But the end result should be roughly the same. So we're going to be starting off at this point here and going to the end of this video because they're separated into different parts, obviously, as Twitch changes their videos. Now, this last frame here, we are not going to be counting for Joden's run here because, as you can see, every 3 frames, his timer changes 1, which makes sense because his timer is counting tenths of seconds and it's running at 30 frames per second. So that makes sense that every 3 of those, that should go up 1. So if you notice 1, 2, 3, it's number 5 becomes 6, and then it should be also becoming 7 on that frame. So 1 frame, 2 frame, 3 frames, even though this one doesn't change, it's just a non-visual frame for the 20 frames per second game. So this frame here is should be 0.7, but we're not going to count this frame because it's actually going to be the same as the first frame in the next video. So it should be 415.7 on the timer with 2 more frames of 415.7. So marked down, that's, the end is 2831.700. and frame 51351 because this one is not going to be counted. Then when we open up the second half of the video, I wish this could parse a little faster, but oh well. In the first one here, I've already done the math, but I mean, that's pretty easy math. They're big round numbers. 4 minutes, 15 seconds, 0.600, and 7,668 frames. You can do the math yourself if you want to. So we're going to start this next one here. Now, frame 0 and 1, we're going to be counting this, so it should be 0.57 on the first one. Now, as you can see, it switches here. The first frame that it actually shows us here, because these first 2 just kind of dummy existing ones, somehow with the way Twitch encoded it all or separated it, I'm not quite sure. But either way, it switches between 0.7 and 0.8 here. So the 2 numbers before this should be also 0.7, so frame 1 and frame 0. So that means that the gray screen on the last one would have also been 0.7 as well. So that's the same as this first frame here. So basically we can just, instead of counting that one gray frame, we can just start this one at 0.0.0, which is just a lot easier. And then we'll jump to the end of the video here. And jump to the last frame. First frame, it shows the Gannon slashing here, 1355.1, easy peasy, and frame 25053. So those numbers won't change at all. And then, so basically we can just add those times together. That's pretty simple enough. You know, 600 plus 100.7, so like a nice round number there, and 1810. And, you know, if we add up the frames at 25053 plus our 7668 from the previous one, and divide that by the 30 frames per second, we end up with this equivalent. That's in seconds there, so 18 minutes and 10 seconds and 700 milliseconds. So that one's a pretty nice consistent time there, but a solid even 0.7. Alright, so now we're going to jump on to into Cosmo's video. The first one here, Cosmo's video is encoded at 60 frames per second. The top line there, 1280 by 720, 60 frames per second, and his starting point of his video is going to be 2514.56. So 2514.56 there. So the first frame that it vanishes there. And he actually starts his timer a little bit late. Joden actually started his timer like a little early, I believe, and Cosmo starts his like a few like visual frames at 60 frames per second or less. So his first frame here that it vanishes is going to be 2514.536, and we've got the frame number there as well. And we're going to jump to the end of the video here now, and it's going to end at, I believe, 3:15 and change. Yeah, 314.536. 2829.6. Now, why are we counting this gray frame here? Now, as you can see, Cosmos, because it's 60 frames per second, every 2 frames, it's going to go up. The decimal number is going to change because the timer runs at 30 frames per second. So every other frame, we're going to get a visual change on there. So right here, it's at the first frame of 0.6. So that means that this next one, like the next frame, is also going to be 0.06, right? So we're actually going to count this frame because of how it was encoded at 60 frames per second. It's going to be slightly different than Joden's. So that gray frame will actually be the second frame of 0.6. So that leaves his time at 2829.637, including that gray frame there, for 3 minutes 15 seconds, 0.101 seconds, and the frame count is right there as well. Now, the thing that we're going to notice at the beginning of this video is that the first visual frame, we're actually going to be able to see things changing. The timer is going to have moved up to 0.12. And this means that there was, since the last visual frame we had of the last one was 0.06, that means that at least 3 frames have to happen in between that. So as you can see, once we jump to frame 2 here, the timer's at its first frame of 0.12. The changes there, it goes up 0.04 there, because every roughly 3 or 4 or 5, or maybe it's 5 or 6, I'm not exactly sure, intervals, it's going to go up by 0.4 instead of 0.3, just because of the rounding of the hundredths of seconds. So this frame here is 0.12, and so is this one. So that means that these 2 frames before this one that we don't have a good visual indication on must be 315.09. So that last gray frame has to be the second part of the 0.06. So that's why we're actually going to include this frame here for Cosmos. So his starting time for this one again can be 0.0.0, and we'll jump to the end. Way too far, still way too far, 14. And here we go, right here, the last frame, 455, 202, frame 53712. So that means that that segment is exactly as long as this part is. Add it together with the first one, and we're going to end up with a 1810.303 with 65418 frames. So we can just double check that. So 53712 frames plus our existing first chunk is going to be 11706 frames, and just divide this all by the 60 frames per second. And that gives you 0.3. Now that's off by 0.003 of a second, which is basically the error margin when you're rounding numbers. You know, when the frame is rate is what it is. So 0.03 seconds there is not a big frame of frame for margin there. So and we, you know, again, 1090 is 80 minutes and 10 seconds. So I mean, it's pretty easy to just do the math. 0.7 minus the 0.303, and you're gonna end up with a nice steady 0.397 seconds. So that's a little bit off of what I said the other day, 0.04 seconds, but it's pretty similar. And I think this is about the most accurate we can get these runs out right now, just based on the recording rate they were. But yeah, I just wanted to make this video to clarify those few little mistakes I had the other day. But I mean, with this way, the logic is pretty sound. We've counted every frame that the timer is moving, basically, just to make sure we have an indication of what's going on. And that's 0.397. If we just times that at the 20 visual frames this game runs at, it's 0.794. So about 8 frames is what separates the two of them at the moment, as far as I can tell. So hopefully this clarifies everything from the other day. And I will see you all later.